Hello everyone, Crash here, this is RTA Motorsports, and today we're going to finally talk about my RTX 4090 benchmark results in sim racing, both in and out of VR. Here we go. All right, everyone, so it definitely was a lot of work to really get these benchmarking results together. Where I have my computer set behind my rig is really hard to get into. And I did have some situations where I had to change my 4090 and 3090 out just to make sure things like power supply was not playing a role in some of these benchmarking results that I got, because some of them are pretty shocking and some of them not so much. We'll go into those results in just a moment. But if you did not get a chance to watch my unboxing video of my Zotac RTX 4090, definitely do so. I have it down in the description. I go into a little bit more detail regarding some of the specifications of this 4090 versus the 3090 that I had. Funny enough, both cards are Zotac cards and both cards are their Trinity cards. So definitely check out that video if you're interested at all. I'll have it down in the description below. Okay, but let's go over some of the specifications of the 4090 just so you know kind of what's going on here. So again, we got the Zotac RTX 4090, the Trinity card. They do have 3 cards in total. I was really going to buy any one I could get my hands on, and unfortunately, the base model is the only one that was available at the time, if you want to call it that. I mean, it's a 4090. But yeah, we got our hands on the Trinity card. They do have 2 more levels up from that. And I'm guessing it's probably they are binned and they are better overclockers, to my knowledge. We will go into some of the interesting things that I noticed behind this particular card, though, in just a moment, once we get to the benchmarks. But as far as CUDA cores, this has 16,384 CUDA cores. As far as the video memory, 24 gigs of GDDR6X memory. Now, this is actually on par with the 3090, something to keep in mind there. 384-bit bus. It does recommend that you have a 1,000-watt power supply from Zotac's website themselves. Now, I know some of the third parties, they have recommended a 1,000-watt power supply as opposed to the 850 watts that, you know, I've heard NVIDIA recommend. So definitely keep that in mind when you're looking at third-party cards, what power supply they are recommending. That's why I did upgrade mine to a 1,300 watt, so we wouldn't have this issue anymore. It has 3 display ports, 1 HDMI. Just something else to keep in mind here, Asus, their Tough series, they have 3 display ports and 2 HDMI. So in this case, that would have suited me better. I can never find that card in stock. We never bought it. I have 5 displays, 3 for my triple screen, 1 monitor screen above, and then this screen here, which is my desk. I have an HDMI splitter that I'm using, which works fine for me now. But in that case, something like the Asus Tough series probably would have worked better. And if your use case is similar, you may want to wait for that card. But I don't really think that the Tough series and this card are going to really perform much differently. So there's definitely a lot of good use case here. Watching these benchmarks, if you're looking for a 4090, 450 watt power consumption, 450 watt power consumption, and then also there is AV1 encoders built in. This is a new format standard that we are actually getting our hands on. Something that the Intel cards, a lot of people are making a big deal about, as far as video encoding for video production. And if you are a streamer, or if you have your own channel, that may be something that also you want to look into as well. Okay, so I don't want to hold this out any longer. Let's jump into the benchmark results and talk about what happened. Here we go. Okay, let's get into some of the benchmarking here. You can see the Firestrike Ultra scores are vastly different, more than double on the GPU score from the 4090 to 3090. I didn't use the total score. I used specifically the GPU score to tell the two different. And also you can see here the GPU temperatures. Now this is going to be a common theme, are vastly different from the 4090 to the 3090. that huge size difference of that cooler really makes great work of the GPU temperatures there. Again, the Port Royal, you can see those GPU temperatures again, 62C for the 4090 versus 85C for the 3090. Next, we'll get into the TimeSpy Extreme score. Now you can see this is more than double the GPU score from the 3090 to the 4090. 19,177 for the GPU score, but again, temperatures are held in check by that new giant cooler on the 4090s, 60C versus 85C for that 3090. VR Mark Orange Room, this is where it was interesting. The scores are pretty similar, 14,472 versus a 15,115 for the 4090. These are some of the settings that I have kind of utilized for Dirt Rally. Now, Dirt Rally, we only tested the 7680 by 1440p triple screen setup. I just pretty much set it to the Ultra preset. Now, I did this with a lot of titles. I tried to use benchmarking utilities, and here we use the benchmarking utility built into Dirt Rally, and we just kept it at the Ultra preset. Okay, so with this preset here, you can see how the minimums of the 4090, 92.62 is higher than the average of the 3090 by 10 frames. Absolutely insane. So now let's jump into Dirt 2. Now, Dirt 2, what I did with this title is I pretty much just set it to Palace Wales, and we drove with a car on there, and I left it in second gear. So that way I could try to match exactly what we were doing from run to maintain consistency. And then again, with here, the minimum frame rate of the 4090 is considerably higher than the average frame rate for the 3090. And as we go into the 7680 by 1440, again, we are pulling further ahead. Frame rates are over 40 frames higher. And again, the same story here with the average frame rate. So you can see the average frame rate for the 3090 is 60, and the average frame rate for the 4090 is 123, over double the frames per second. Absolutely incredible rasterization performance. And now, as we're going to jump into Assetto Corsa Competizione, for this one here, I actually used MSI's Afterburner to benchmark, so that way we could try to get some 1% lows and 0.1% lows and really get a good comparison there. But you can see we were using the Epic preset, and again, for most titles, that's kind of what I did, just mainly use the out-of-the-box presets. But you could see, again, similar story, almost double the frame rate in every single case. Average frame rate is actually more than double with 118 frames there. But you could see the 1% lows and 0.1% lows are not too far different when you're going from the 3090 to the 4090. Those will actually come across as stutter. But the amazing thing that I could see here is that, again, we are hitting a minimum of 90 frames per second with more than, what's that, 30 frames or near 30 frames per second, higher than the average of the 3090. That's incredible. But now we're at 120 or near 120 frames per second on 7680 by 1440p. That is triple monitors. Okay, so as we jump into Project Cars 2, I do want to let you know we did use, again, a replay file, so that way there was no variability going from run to run. And that's pretty much how I've tried to run most of these sim racing titles, in replay files, so that way it's using the game engine and there's no variance from different cars being in different locations or doing different things on the grid. Also, all of these that I'm using replays, I start from the grid. The grid is the hardest point to run, and that's what we tried to do. So in here in iRacing, you can see at 1440p, there's not much of a difference there. 179.82 versus 247.45. I wouldn't really say, if you're just running a single 1440p panel, that if you're only using iRacing, that you would really want to upgrade for that reason. But then I went to the triple screen setup and I seen a very similar result, 156 versus 178, and you could really see the max frame rate is really starting to get bottlenecked there. I think this title is heavily CPU bound, unfortunately. So then I threw OBS at it. I figured, let's try to record at the same time and see if we really get that pull away that I was expecting. We got a little bit. It really wasn't that amazing result that we've seen in every other benchmark that we have done here so far. 134.73 average versus 152.71. Yeah, that's a great result, but not really, to me, worth the upgrade if you're solely on iRacing. So then I threw VR, and this is going to be the beginning of the VR test. Now, again, for these iRacing results, I used the same replay file, and the replay is set to class 1 graphics settings. So you can definitely check that out, just a class 1 preset. But this is where we've seen that doubling. Now, 88.98 is basically 90 frames per second. Most of the time we use FPS VR for benchmarking, and it's because it gives us this data here. You can see the reprojection ratio from the 3090 to the 4090. Now, these are not settings I would normally race with in iRacing. They're pumped up quite a bit more to really get the difference between the two GPUs, and you can see the ratio of the 3090 is 44.8% versus the reprojection ratio of a 1.3% with the 4090. Dropped frames, we dropped a lot of frames with the 3090 versus 3 with the 4090. Insane. P-cars too in VR, you could see 43.47 frames per second on average versus 83.75 with the 4090. Again, reprojection was on, but the average frame rate that I experienced in the headset was closer to 90, which means that we were running 90, natively 90 more frequently. So let's go into that VR data, and you could see that reprojection ratio basically half the time with the 3090. We were in reprojection versus the 4090 at a 7%. We did drop more frames with the 4090 versus the 3090. And this is where I feel there needs to be a little bit of driver optimizations, because once we went into ACC and really started utilizing ACC in VR, we started noticing some little oddities here and there. Although the frame rate really tells a similar story as we've been experiencing before. In this title here, we used the VR High preset. Now you can see with the 3090, that's not really a great preset to run because it's just 45.45 frame rate on average versus 85.74. And in the headset, I did experience 90 frames per second more frequently, more often. It felt smoother, felt actually raceable for once. I've never been able to use VR High before, but you could really see the dropped frames was insane with both titles. And those dropped frames really came across as stutter. And even though we were hitting that reprojection ratio of only 4.8% in the 4090, it really did feel intermittently stuttery, and I really do feel that driver optimization will help us out there. All right, hopefully you enjoyed those benchmarks, and hopefully they gave you some useful information in your buying decision if you're looking at the 4090. This card is definitely super impressive, but I am really curious to hear your thoughts down in the comment box below. Let me know. And then also, do not forget, please hit that subscribe button and that like button. It will help me out big time. But not only that, it'll grow this channel so that way I can get more products to review for you all. I really enjoy doing that, and I really enjoy just giving an unbiased opinion. That's why I buy all the things, or most of the things that we have here, so that way I can do that for you all. So I'll greatly appreciate that if you can do that. But also, I did want to bring up some interesting things that I noticed during all of these benchmarks. Now, that being the temperatures. The temperatures were absolutely insane. And that's normally something that when you're buying the cards that are models above each other, you're normally getting a better cooler, better overclocking for cooling, things like that. You know, you sometimes even the cards with the water blocks that are built into them. That's not really the case this time. I've noticed, and I have some of my notes here. For instance, the Time Spy Extreme benchmark result that we did. The card only hit an average temperature of 60 C. Now, let's jump into my 3090. And the 3090, where is that? Time Spy Extreme, boom. Let's go into the details, and yeah, so 85 C. And that was something that I noticed on most of the benchmarking results that I did, both in-game, in VR, and the actual benchmarks from 3D Mark and VR Mark, was the temperatures were insanely low. Now, this cooler design that they have incorporated in the 4090, you could see the size difference of the cards. They are insanely large. Now, this goes for not only the OEM card, but also the third-party cards. They are super huge. And I think it's that new vapor chamber design, the size of the cooler, everything really incorporated into the card itself is really making it an efficiently card. I mean, that cooler is working really good in all cases. So I'm not really sure exactly what you're going to get when you're buying the better grade cards, besides possibly just a better, MOSFET design, better power delivery design, and a binned chip. I mean, it's got to be those things. You're not getting a better cooler anymore. The cooler has nothing to do with it anymore, because even this base model, if you want to call it that, it's a 4090, but this base model 4090 has an amazingly efficient and good cooler on it. It stood down to 60C the whole benchmarking run. It's absolutely insane how well the coolers are working on almost every 4090 review I'm watching. So that is not really a factor in overclocking anymore. And then the other thing I noticed is, like, for instance, the 3090 that I had, its base clock was, I want to say it was around 1400, 1500, and it boosted to like 1700 on Time Spy Extreme. But like, if we go to the 4090 here, let's go to its result. It boosted all the way up to 1745. And then let's actually go to Firestrike Ultra, and let's see what that one, again, 1745. And that's out of the box without really doing anything. Its base clock is supposed to be, what is it, 2520. So it is boosting well above what its boost clock is 2520, and it's boosting well above that to 2745. So I think if I really delved into the settings, I could get it a little bit above that. I don't think I'll hit 3000 megahertz with this card, to be honest with you, but definitely cooling is not part of the problem as to why I would not hit 3000 megahertz. My power supply is more than enough to really, push whatever it wants. That's not part of the problem, but these cards are just amazing. They are absolutely amazing. Out of the box results, I'm getting 2745 as far as the clock frequency on average. Cooling is not an issue at all with any of these cards. It's an absolutely insane, monstrous card. As far as, do I recommend someone goes from the 3090 to 4090? Well, you really got to think, does your system do what you want it to do? And I know a lot of us that are in VR, we've had to make a lot of sacrifices as far as what we see, especially in Assetto Corsa Competizione. That title has been the most difficult title to run in VR at some sort of competent level while maintaining visuals of some kind. Normally, you really have to almost get rid of shadows altogether, or really scale back super sampling, or there's normally a lot of sacrifices you have to make in that title to make it run somewhat near 90, or at least in reprojected 45 at a competent level where you don't feel the stutters. And this is the first time that I felt like you could just put it to the setting and run it, and it works well. Especially in iRacing, especially in, normal Assetto Corsa, it's absolutely insane. We didn't really incorporate that here because I don't have too much an issue running it on my 3090. But, Dirt Rally, any of these titles, you run them and they just run now. And to me, that is a game changer. I'm sure as drivers become a little bit more optimized, we will get less of the random stuttering and jittering that I did notice on some of the benchmarks in VR. So once that's smoothed out, I feel like this card is going to be an absolute monster. I don't know if they're ever going to enable any sort of DLSS in VR or anything like that. If that ever comes to be, then we are set to go. And I know some of these newer headsets are now having foveated rendering with eye tracking built in. That could help even further. I really do think this is the turning point in which VR is now a tangible way to race in sim racing without having to make the crazy in-depth setting sacrifices that we had to make with really nitpicking certain things to get it to run exactly at 90. Now, if you're just playing normal VR titles, this card is not for you. The 3090 is not even for you. You could play with like a 3060 just fine. Sim racing and sim flight has been something that has been an extremely difficult task for VR headsets to really push those frames to our eyes, or really for our GPUs to push those frames to our eyes. And I feel like this is the first time that we've really had a GPU that was competent in doing so. So everyone, take from that what you will. I'm happy with my purchase in the end. Again, I did adopt the 3090 when it was first released about 2 years ago. So for me, this adoption timeline is appropriate. But yeah, I'm extremely happy with this purchase here, and I'm extremely happy with the performance of this card so far. And I know as drivers come out, drivers mature, it's only going to get smoother from here on out. Everyone, I'm Crash. This is RTA Motorsports. If you have any further questions, definitely let me know in the comment box below. Again, subscribe, hit that like button. Helps us out big time, more than you know. Everyone, stay safe, stay happy. I'll catch you all next time.